I don't know how we can take the Pro Football Hall of Fame seriously anymore with the failure of the Pro Football Hall of Fame committee to not vote in Bill Belichick on his very first ballot. That is the biggest disgrace I think I've seen with Hall of Fames. And yeah, you get the Baseball Hall of Fame, which pisses people off every single year. Yet this, you don't vote in the most successful head coach in NFL history that orchestrated a 20-year dynasty. You don't vote him in on the first ballot? What are we doing? What are we doing? And you know what? That's where I'm going to start today, because usually I save my thoughts for last, but this story, as much, and I'll get to the Patriots, I'll get to the Denver game, and as great as that was, this story is up here. I mean, this is just surreal what happened. You have a slam dunk, absolute, no question, Hall of Famer based on his credentials. Straight up. I don't know how anybody can say otherwise. And trust me, I've heard a few, which drives me up a wall listening to these people drives me up a wall, right? Listening to these people twist and turn and say that, oh, he was nothing without Brady, or he had Spygate or Deflategate, all that nonsense, right? So I don't understand how you can twist yourself into that line of thinking that Bill Belichick is not a first ballot Hall of Famer, regardless of, or not even regardless, taking into account all the stuff that you want to call that was going on, right? So, frequent commenter, Knock Dog, just kicking it off early here. Unbelievable. I've lost all respect for the Hall of Fame. Exactly. I don't know how you couldn't lose respect for the Hall of Fame, an institution that one Bill Belichick idolizes. Do you not remember him on the NFL 100 greatest players of all time, or not the 100 greatest players, the 100-year all-century team? Belichick was on every episode and could tell you about Don Hudson in 1950s and 60s, all the way to Ed Reed, Ray Lewis, Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, you name it. He knew everybody and broke down the film as if he just did it the night before, knowing full well he's had that in his memory bank forever, regardless. This is an absolute failure by the Hall of Fame committee. I don't know how many times I can say that. You know, one of the things that when you're a Hall of Fame voter, it is your job to vote in the most successful player, coach, and to some degree owner of all time, right? You know, and for owner, obviously, you have to have influence on the league. You got to do a little bit more than just have a good win percentage, because at the end of the day, you just hired the head coach who then brought in other players, blah, 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 blah. But that's your job, right? Your job is to pick the best of the best, not the most average, not the most above average, not the guy with, you know, a couple good years, but then just flatlined the rest of his career. No. The Hall of Fame should be about putting in the best of the best off screen. That's how best these people are, right? So, when you come across a resume like Bill Belichick's, 6-time Super Bowl champion as a head coach, 8-time Super Bowl champion as a defensive coordinator, his script, his playbook for stopping Jim Kelly and the K-Gun, which, fun fact, was started by Bill Polian. We'll get to that in a little bit, but his playbook to stop that is already in the Hall of Fame in 1991. He is a 3-time Coach of the Year award winner. He has won 17 division titles. He has won 31 playoff games, most of any coach in history. I could go on and on and on, and I'll bring up his stats in a little bit, but how do you sit there and justify to yourself that I'm not going to vote him in his first year of eligibility? How can you do that? Because to me, that signals a failure of doing your job. And what happens to you if you fail to do your job? You get fired. You don't have a job anymore, which is what absolutely should happen. Now, why did these voters not vote in Bill Belichick? What was their rationale? And right now, all we could do is just is speculate, right? Is speculate what the rationale was. I mean, for the first part, these voters could very well have thought that, hey, you know what? I really like Elsie Greenwood. I really like Roger Craig. I really like Robert Kraft. And Bill Belichick, with his stats and attributes and everything else, don't worry, the rest of the guys will vote him in. I'm just going to be the lone dissenter and not vote him in. And the best part is I don't have to I don't have to tell anybody. You know, that's not how the Pro Football Hall of Fame, committee works. So it's perfect. Well, no, it's not, because that is a ridiculous line of thinking. To sit there and say that my 49 other brethren are going to vote in the most successful head coach in the greatest dynasty in NFL history, he helped orchestrate that. To sit there and say the 49 other brethren are going to vote him in, but I'm not, because all the other, I really like those guys. That's foolish. That's ridiculous. Another line of thinking is the fact that Bill Belichick, in just last year, right before this season started, was hell-bent on trying to get a head coaching job in the NFL. Now, he never got the job. The closest he came was getting down to the final interview for Atlanta. For the final interview, and it didn't work out. And that's, I think that was 2 years ago, and that's when he went into television, all of that fun stuff. So now he's in North Carolina. He coached a year in Carolina. But are some of the voters thinking that, well, Belichick still wants a job in the NFL, so I don't want to vote him in because I don't think it's going to be good on the league to have a current Hall of Famer coaching on the sideline? And to that I say, what does that even matter? Who cares if Belichick is a current Hall of Famer and currently coaching on the sideline? Because at the end of the day, for the last 10 years, he's been called a future first ballot Hall of Famer. Almost every time he got announced on television, the future Hall of Famer Bill Belichick is coaching for the Patriots once again, leading them to a 12-4 season and a first-round bye. It always happens. I just watched a Rich Eisen video that he did, I think, 4 years ago, talking about Robert Kraft and his candidacy back then. And he called Bill Belichick a future first ballot Hall of Famer. Done. No question. And now we're stuck in this predicament. And these voters put it upon themselves to sit there and think, well, you do know that Belichick could still coach in the league, so I don't want to vote him in because of that. It's going to be a bad look. Why? Why is that a bad look? It's not. You're doing something that you shouldn't be doing. Not to mention the other aspect of that, which is Bill Belichick was an a-hole. Like, you know, I think we can all sit there and look at his press conferences and his disdain for the media, unless it was the right person, right people, then he would open up and you could actually see him. Wow, he actually isn't. He's actually a good guy. Once you get him talking about football, boom, see you later. He is off in his own little world, and it's fun. It's entertaining. But the rest of it, the stuff that you see with the interviews, we're on to Cincinnati. Well, Bill, Jimmy did a great, we're on to Cincinnati. Are you going to sit Tom down? We're on to Cincinnati. Like, no. You put it upon yourself to create a moral clause that you didn't like the guy because of his, kind of dickish personality that you're like, no, I don't want him in because of that. Which, again, that's not your job. Again, you failed to do your job. That's 3 times. So the 4th time and the last one is these guys are still holding Spygate and Deflategate over his heads, which we all know with Deflategate. Can I honestly sit there and say that Bill had absolutely no idea about the deflated footballs? As much as I want to say yes to that, Bill Belichick knows everything that is going on. Just another example, Devin McCourty talking about his first year in the league, playing corner, playing on this side of the field, going backward, defending where the lighthouse is. And Belichick was talking about how the wind was swirling, and Devin's looking at him like, seriously? How do you know this? And then all of a sudden, Devin comes down with an interception because of the wind in that general area. And from that point on, Devin said that he just drinks the Kool-Aid. Like, he bought in, and Belichick knows everything, right? So that's why a part of me doesn't necessarily believe that he didn't know. But with Deflategate, I'll give him the shadow of the doubt. Spygate, the dude is openly admitted, right? We all understand that he did it. Now, this idea that Belichick was filming practices, that he filmed the walkthrough and run through of the Rams in 2002 for Super Bowl 36 is false. ESPN has made a retraction. What is that word? A retractment when they talked about that. The Boston Herald, which was reported by John Tomasi, also made a massive retractment on that statement that Belichick filmed the practices for Super Bowl 36. Yet, you have Mike Motz and Marshall Faulk still believing that. I think even Kurt Warner still holds a grudge. Clearly, Eric Dickerson holds a grudge because he was hoping the Rams would win, and then we'd play the Rams again, this, that, and the other. So, this is the problem, is that is verifiably false. If you watch that game, we were just super physical with the Rams in Super Bowl 36. They had no idea. They were a finesse team. They didn't understand what physicality was. Now, could you argue there was some holding, by today's standards? Without a shadow of a doubt. I mean, the only reason why we didn't blow the Rams out of the water is because Willie McGinnis bear hugged Marshall Faulk, at the 2-yard line, and Bucky Jones scoops up the fumble and runs it back 97. Otherwise, that game would have been a blowout, and it wouldn't have come down to Vinatieri's kick at the end. But that it is what it is. Otherwise, this idea with Spygate and Deflategate, it doesn't matter. yes, you can say it does, but we've already paid our penance. We've already paid our dues with that. And it was also talked about how it's, it's not that big of a deal. And why do I say that? Because it took, almost 20 years later for this to finally come out. But you have guys like Jimmy Johnson who tweeted out Jimmy Johnson tweeting out, quote, if they are using the excuse of Spygate, that's ridiculous. Many teams, including ourselves, tried it. Howard Mudd at Kansas City, who later coached for Bill Polian and Tony Dungy, gave us the idea. He was the best. We didn't get anything and stopped, but many teams gave it a try. You also have guys like Bill Cowher talking about it. Here's a brief snippet of him with Boomer Esiason on Boomer's radio show.
Say to you in regards to Spygate, they were doing nothing different than anybody else was doing. We don't have to worry about it in today's game, because today's game, we have the microphone. You could talk to the people on the field. Back then, you had the signal. We had wristbands. Okay, so the wristbands we would use, and Coach LeBeau was old school, and Coach LeBeau says, okay, I will do the wristbands. He did it for like one series. And then all of a sudden, he got back and hey, guess what that is? It doesn't take long. That's man-free. Okay, that's single high.
So his signal's on the side.
So, and to go off that point, did they film the signals? Did they go down to spots that were not agreed upon and film the signals? Yes, they did. I'm not denying that. But this idea that it wasn't happening, I also just came across this beauty of Seth Wickersham when talking about his book about Spygate in 2007. He has this passage where Roger Goodell was reaching out to many coaches, and one of them being Mike Shanahan. And here's the brief passage in the book, excuse me. So in the book, it says, quote, Goodell called around the league, including to Mike Shanahan. What's going on here? Goodell said. I wish I had thought to videotape signals, Shanahan replied. I'm disappointed in myself. Then it comes down to Roger, Shanahan continued. First of all, people are always trying to steal signals. Peyton Manning is the best. If you don't change your signals, you're dead. Goodell understood, but thought that taping them illegally was different. The rule was the rule. Then Shanahan says, quote, you can't say that Bill Belichick is a bad guy, Shanahan said. Bill is just better at it than most are, end quote. He took it a step further, arguing that taping signals was worth the risk because there was no precedent for punishment. If nobody knew what the penalty was for crossing the line, why not cross the line, end quote. So that was just a brief little snippet from Seth Wickersham's book. And also, you go back to the Dynasty video, the documentary that was basically a big bashing of Bill Belichick, and he was and you get that piece where Robert Kraft asked Bill how much of this helped us out, how much of these videotaping the signals actually helped us out. And Belichick said 1% to 2% at most, and that's when Robert Kraft called him a schmuck. So again, everything has been fleshed out. Everything has been done. When you look at Belichick's credentials, this is an absolute failure by the Hall of Fame committee. And, of course, two of the committee members were Bill Polian and Tony Dungy. Now, Tony Dungy has gone into hiding, and I'm not saying that he did or didn't vote for Bill. But in the in Sorry, I have it right here. Oh, yeah. So in the Seth Wickersham and Don Van Natta piece, you have it being talked about how Bill Polian is still holding a grudge over Bill Belichick to finally go after him and get this off, which also, when I first talked about this, when I saw this come out yesterday, my gut reaction was I am not surprised because this is exactly the stuff that they've been holding against Robert Kraft for the last 15 years. And yet we're in the same predicament now. You know, the fact that Robert Kraft is not in the Hall of Fame is insane due to the fact that the committee members were holding it against him, you know, about Spygate and Deflategate and said, nope, you're going to be punished for this. It doesn't matter that you put all this emphasis on Bill. It doesn't matter about your book. It doesn't matter all your posturing and all your, you know, help. It's nope, we're not letting you win. And I came on this show not too long ago and said it's a shame that Robert Kraft is not in, but it didn't bother me. Well, now with Bill, it does bother me. You know, the fact that both Robert and Bill are dealing with this is absolute nonsense. And in the meantime, the Hall voted in Jerry Jones, who has not been to the Super Bowl since the mid-90s. And the Patriots, meanwhile, have gone to 11 Super Bowls since the last time the Cowboys were in a Super Bowl. They also voted in Pat Bowlen, who won a couple Super Bowls with John Elway and the one with Peyton Manning. But was he there to help broker the peace like Robert Kraft was? And then they let Eddie DiBartolo Jr. get in, who had to sell his team because of the fraud that was going on with him. Okay, like how did those three guys get in? Now, if you want to say Jerry because of the TV deals and how he helped, you know, expand the NFL, okay, like it's excuse me for 1 second. All right. Are we good now? All right. So, if you want to say how Jerry Jones was expanding the NFL and bringing in all the TV revenue, having them compete and having them spend billions of dollars and, you know, creating the TV that we know now, okay, fine. I got it. Like, that makes sense to me. I can understand that even though they haven't won since the 90s. But with Robert Kraft, I mean, Robert Kraft has been massive to this league, saved football in Foxborough, in New England, basically. He brought in Bill Belichick when everyone was telling him not to. He helped broker the peace in 2011 by reaching out to Jeff Saturday to get the CBA done. Okay, and yet, why isn't he in the Hall? Oh, that's right. Because of a bunch of nonsense, really. You know, I'm not saying that it didn't happen, at least with Spygate. Deflategate was hilariously laughable. But people were pissed, and the NFL, all the other owners, saw it as an opportunity to go after the Patriots once again. And that's why Deflategate became such a big thing. Now, to wrap all the way back, Bill Polian was the guy in the Seth Wickersham piece with Don Van Natta that was being reported where, I'm just trying to find it here. Okay. Here it is. Sorry. Second page. Multiple sources told ESPN that Spygate and Deflategate came up in deliberations among voters. A voter who spoke on the condition of anonymity said that Polian, an ardent Kraft supporter and former GM of the Bills and Colts and chief rival of the Patriots dynasty, especially in the early days, Polian told some voters he believed Belichick should, quote, wait a year before induction as penance for Spygate. A veteran Hall voter told ESPN on Tuesday, quote, the only explanation for the outcome was the cheating stuff. It really bothered some of the guys. Now, Bill Polian then goes on to tell SI that he categorically denied the allegations and that he 100% certain voted for Belichick. Well, in an interview with ESPN on Tuesday, Polian denied fellow voters that Belichick should serve a one-year penance for Spygate. He said he heard his fellow voters float that idea, but insisted he didn't agree or disagree with the proposal. Polian said he voted for Kraft and even spoke up on his behalf during deliberations, saying Kraft had no knowledge of the Spygate scheme. And this part's a good one. Polian added that he could not remember with 100% certainty if he voted for Belichick, saying he was 95% sure he voted for the coach and a player, most likely Greenwood. But end quote. So you tell one news source that 100% certain you voted for Belichick, but then the next day, more like 95% certain. And while that strikes me as liar, the other aspect of this, which I think is not being reported as much, is the fact that it's not that Polian denied that or didn't agree with the sentiment, right? That idea being floated around. It wasn't him. Because it says here that Polian insisted he didn't agree or disagree with that proposal. Agree or disagree? That means you agreed with the proposal. Like, let's not play this game. There is a playbook, a defensive playbook in the Hall of Fame that Bill Belichick schemed up against his 1991 Buffalo Bills, the first time the Bills lost in the Super Bowl because of the kick going wide right. That was Bill Belichick's defensive scheme that stopped the K-gun. You don't think Bill Polian is a little butthurt over that? Of course he is. Not to mention the fact that in 2003, we were kicking Peyton Manning's ass up and down the field. We were stopping Marvin Harrison, making him look pedestrian. We were stopping Reggie Wayne. He was young, but it wasn't like he was doing much against us anyway. And so then in 2003, when we subsequently beat them, Bill Polian at the time was on the NFL's competition committee and extremely influential, and made defensive holding and illegal contact points of emphasis for the following season. So much so that the rule book, the illegal contact fouls skyrocketed from 79 in 2003 to 191 in 2004, the year we played Jacksonville in that Super Bowl 39 right there. Or not played Jacksonville, played in Jacksonville against Philly in Super Bowl 39. 191 illegal contact fouls. But the funny part is they came into Foxborough and they still lost. And Teddy Bruschi said it the best. Take a listen.
We play. That's what we do. We don't talk, we play. You come to Foxborough, it's going to be snowing, it's going to be cold. Come on in here. You want to say all you want? You want to change the rules? Change them. We still play and we win. That's what we do. All right.
That's what we do. Change the rules. We still are going to win. That's what is fantastic. And so, and Bill Polian was obviously pissed off, and that's why he got the rules changed. So you don't think that Bill Polian to this day still doesn't hold a grudge, thinking that, oh, well, if we beat the Giants in 91, that we would have won multiple titles because our whole fortunes would have changed, or, the Patriots were getting away with murder, and that's why they kept beating Peyton Manning, Marvin Harrison, Reggie Wayne, Edgar James, Of course he did. And then with his comments, it just makes all the more sense in the world that he was the guy behind it. This is why I say to them all, bye-bye, see ya. Go to Florida, go to California, Arizona, wherever you retired at, and just stay there. You're done. You don't need your vote anymore. This is ridiculous that you left out this man who, by all accounts, should have been a first ballot Hall of Famer. So much so, look at the comparisons between first ballot Hall of Fame coaches and Bill Belichick. As I mentioned earlier, Bill Belichick, 17 division titles, most all time. 31 playoff victories, most all time. 8 Super Bowl wins, 2 of which came as a defensive coordinator. But still, he had 6 as a head coach, 2 as a DC. And then you look at the first ballot Hall of Fame coaches, Tom Landry, Chuck Noll, and Don Shula. Tom Landry had 13 division titles. Chuck Noll had 9. Don Shula had 15. Playoff wins. Tom Landry had 22. Chuck Noll had 16. Don Shula had 19. And then you combine those 3 men, they combine for 8 total Super Bowls. So ultimately, this is just absurd and sad and a horrendous look on the Pro Football Hall of Fame. In a time in a season that we should be enjoying and embracing the history of the game and the men who made this game, we can't. Because we're so wound up with Bill Belichick not getting in, having this sense of injustice done, that Bill Belichick is not in the Hall of Fame. It's honestly a tragedy, and it makes the Hall of Fame look weak. Not only do they look weak, but they look even weaker because they're all hiding behind anonymity. Now, there have been some voters who came out. I voted for Bill. I would love to see every single voter come out and say what they voted on. And they absolutely should. I also do not condone any harm to them or any harm to their property or, their job if they're currently working in print media or radio or Sirius, whatever. It's not that they should lose their jobs. They should lose their right to vote for the Hall of Fame. Simple as that. Because this isn't good. This doesn't reflect well on the Hall of Fame. The greatest coach in NFL history isn't a first ballot Hall of Famer. I honestly don't know what else to say. I mean, I have a quote right here. Bill Belichick is well known for saying players win games, coaches lose games. Yeah, well, in that 20-year run, he didn't lose very many of them. I can tell you that much. So it is crazy.